The spectral screams of Ravenwood. The village of Eldermist, shrouded in a perpetual mist that clung to the rolling hills like a spectral shroud, held a secret. On its outskirts, where the gnarled branches of ancient oaks clawed at the sky, stood Ravenwood Manor, a forbidding silhouette against the bruised twilight. The manor was a monument to forgotten grandeur and whispered tragedies. Emma and Daniel Hart, a young couple with a shared passion for history and restoration, had purchased the estate at an auction. Ignoring the ominous warnings from the villagers, they arrived at Ravenwood on a blustery November afternoon, their moving van groaning under the weight of their belongings and their dreams. The manor's facade was an intimidating spectacle of weathered stone and Gothic architecture. Ivy, thick as pythons, snaked across the walls, obscuring stained glass windows that depicted scenes of a bygone era. The air itself seemed heavy, laden with the weight of secrets and the lingering scent of decay. "It's imposing," Daniel said, his voice betraying a flicker of unease. He couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, judged by the very stones of the manor. A shiver ran down his spine, and he tightened his grip on Emma's hand. Emma, ever the optimist, squeezed his hand reassuringly. "It's magnificent, darling. Just imagine the stories these walls could tell. We'll bring it back to life. Restore its former glory." She refused to let the gloomy atmosphere dampen her spirits. This was their dream, and she wouldn't let superstition ruin it. But as they began unloading their belongings, a sense of foreboding crept over them. The villagers' warnings echoed in their minds. Tales of strange lights, disembodied whispers, and the tragic fate of the Ravenwood family. Old Man Hemlock, the village cobbler, had spoken of a curse, of a young woman wronged, her spirit forever bound to the estate. His words, delivered with a trembling voice and haunted eyes, had planted a seed of doubt in Emma's heart. As dusk settled and shadows stretched long fingers across the overgrown lawns, the manor seemed to awaken. A low moan echoed from the depths of the house, like the sigh of a restless soul. The wind howled through the broken window panes like a mournful lament, sending shivers down Emma's spine. Unpacking boxes in the cavernous kitchen, Emma felt a prickle on her skin. A sense of being watched intensified, raising goosebumps on her arms. She turned, her heart pounding in her chest, but saw nothing, just the flickering shadows cast by the single bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling. "It's just the wind," she muttered to herself, trying to convince herself, but a knot of fear tightened in her stomach. That night, as they lay in the master bedroom, a cold draft snaked across the room, chilling them to the bone. The antique four-poster bed creaked and groaned, and from somewhere deep within the house, a floorboard creaked with the weight of an invisible step. The sound was distinct, deliberate, like someone was pacing the hallway outside their room. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she clutched Daniel's arm. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her initial excitement. He strained his ears, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. "It's probably just the house settling," he said, his voice lacking conviction. He, too, felt a growing sense of unease, a primal fear he couldn't explain. But neither of them could shake the feeling that they weren't alone. "That's something," or someone, was watching them from the shadows. Their every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. Sleep evaded them that night, their minds filled with unsettling images and the echo of those ghostly footsteps. The following days were a whirlwind of unpacking and exploring. Ravenwood was a labyrinth of rooms, each filled with the remnants of a forgotten era. Faded tapestries hung on the walls, their once vibrant colors now muted by time. Cobwebs draped antique furniture, shrouding them in a ghostly veil. And the musty smell of time, a blend of dust and decay, permeated every corner, clinging to their clothes and their skin. Emma, with her infectious enthusiasm, saw potential in every chipped vase and dusty chandelier. She envisioned the manor restored to its former glory, a testament to their love and dedication. However, beneath her optimism, a sliver of doubt began to emerge. The strange occurrences, the unsettling atmosphere, were taking a toll on her. Daniel, however, couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The manor seemed to be watching him, judging him with its silent, watchful eyes. Every creaking floorboard, every draft of cold air, whispered of unseen eyes and restless spirits, sending shivers down his spine. He felt a growing sense of dread, a premonition that something terrible was going to happen. One afternoon, while exploring the upper floors, Daniel stumbled upon a locked room at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor. The door was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands, as if guarding a terrible secret. Curiosity piqued. He fetched a rusty key from a drawer in the library and, with a grunt of effort, managed to unlock the door. The room was a small study, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large portrait hanging above the fireplace. The portrait depicted a young woman, her beauty hauntingly preserved by the artist's brushstrokes. She wore a gown of emerald green, her hair the color of raven's wings, her eyes a startling shade of violet. But it was her expression that captivated Daniel. There was a sadness in her eyes, a hint of desperation, that seemed to reach out to him across the centuries. As he stood there, mesmerized by the portrait, he felt a cold spot form on the back of his neck. He glanced at the fireplace, expecting a draft, but the embers were cold. The chill intensified, and he realized it was emanating from the portrait itself. A wave of fear washed over him, his heart pounding in his chest. And then the eyes in the portrait moved. Daniel gasped, stumbling back. The woman in the painting was now staring directly at him, her violet eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. A silent scream escaped his lips, and he fled the room, slamming the door behind him. He leaned against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The image of those eyes, filled with sorrow and something akin to accusation, seared itself into his mind. He didn't mention the incident to Emma, fearing she would think him mad. But the image of those eyes, filled with sorrow and something akin to accusation, haunted his waking thoughts and invaded his dreams, leaving him with a constant sense of dread. The strange occurrences escalated. Objects moved inexplicably, defying the laws of physics. A vase would suddenly topple off a shelf, shattering on the floor. A chair would scrape across the room, as if pushed by an invisible hand. Doors opened and closed on their own. accompanied by the mournful creak of old hinges and disembodied whispers, like the rustling of unseen silk, echoed through the empty hallways, sending chills down their spines. Emma, initially dismissive, found it increasingly difficult to ignore the mounting evidence of the supernatural. Her rational mind struggled to find explanations. But the reality of the situation was undeniable. Fear, once a distant whisper, now gnawed at her, a constant companion that cast a shadow over her every thought and action. One evening, as she sat reading in the library, a book flew off the shelf. Narrowly missing her head, she jumped up, heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat. She scanned the room for a logical explanation, her eyes darting from the closed windows to the empty doorway. But there was none. The windows were closed. There was no draft. And she was alone in the room. The book, a heavy tome bound in leather, lay open on the floor, as if discarded by an unseen reader. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes they were just faint murmurs, barely audible, like the rustling of leaves in a distant forest. Other times, they were clear as day, chilling whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, penetrating her very being. "Leave this place," they hissed, their voices cold and menacing. "You are not welcome here." Emma, her nerves frayed, confided in Daniel. She recounted the incident with the book, the escalating paranormal activity, and the chilling whispers that haunted her waking hours. He, pale and shaken from his own encounter with the portrait, could no longer deny the reality of their situation. They were living in a haunted house, and the haunting was becoming increasingly malevolent. Desperate for answers, they decided to delve into the history of Ravenwood Manor. They scoured local archives, poring over dusty documents and faded newspaper clippings. They learned of the Ravenwood family, a lineage marked by tragedy and misfortune. They read about the untimely deaths, the mysterious disappearances, and the whispers of madness that had plagued the family for generations. Each story, each tragic event, added another layer of fear and fascination to the mystery of Ravenwood. And then they discovered the story of Eleanor Ravenwood, the young woman in the portrait. Eleanor, according to the records, was the last of the Ravenwood line. She was described as a beautiful and intelligent woman, but also as a recluse, prone to melancholy. Rumors of her eccentricity and her interest in the occult had circulated in the village, fueling whispers of witchcraft and dark magic. She was an outcast, feared and shunned by the superstitious villagers. Her fate was shrouded in mystery. She had vanished without a trace one stormy night. Her disappearance never explained. Some said she had fled the manor, seeking refuge from the whispers and accusations. Others claimed she had been murdered, her body hidden somewhere within the vast estate. The mystery surrounding her disappearance had only added to the manor's sinister reputation. Emma and Daniel, piecing together the fragments of information, felt a growing sense of connection to Eleanor. They saw her not as a malevolent spirit, but as a victim, trapped in the manor by a tragic fate. They felt a surge of empathy for her, a desire to understand her story and perhaps help her find peace. They decided to try and communicate with her, hoping to understand her story and perhaps help her find peace. They purchased a Ouija board and, on a moonless night, gathered in the drawing room, the only light coming from the flickering flames of the fireplace. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and a touch of fear. With trembling hands, they placed their fingers on the planchette. "Eleanor," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the fire. "Are you here?" The planchette remained still. Then, slowly, it began to move. A wave of excitement, mixed with trepidation, washed over them. They were about to make contact with the unknown. The planchette glided across the board, spelling out words that sent shivers down their spines. "Help me," it spelled. "I am trapped." The letters appeared slowly, deliberately, as if each one was imbued with an unseen force. Emma and Daniel exchanged a terrified glance. They were communicating with Eleanor. The realization hit them like a physical blow, sending a jolt of adrenaline through their veins. Fear warred with excitement, creating a cocktail of emotions that left them breathless. Encouraged, they asked more questions. They learned of her loneliness, her despair, her longing for justice. She described her imprisonment in the tower room. The cold stone walls, the barred windows, the oppressive darkness. She told them of her fear of her cousin, Edward, who had coveted the Ravenwood fortune and had conspired to lock her away, branding her as insane. She recounted the nights she had tried to escape, only to be caught and murdered by Edward. Her body hidden in the well in the overgrown gardens. Her words painted a vivid picture of her suffering, her desperation, her yearning for release. The Ouija board session ended abruptly when a violent gust of wind slammed the windows open, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. The sudden darkness, the howling wind, and the lingering echo of Eleanor's words sent a wave of panic through them. They scrambled for the matches, their hands shaking, their hearts pounding in their chests. Emma and Daniel, shaken but determined, knew they had to find Eleanor's remains and bring her story to light. They felt a sense of responsibility, a moral obligation to help this woman who had suffered for so long. Fear was still present, but it was now tempered by a sense of purpose. They searched the gardens, following Eleanor's directions from the Ouija board. And there, hidden beneath a tangle of thorns and weeds, they found the old well. Its stone rim was crumbling, and a sense of foreboding emanated from its dark depths. With the help of a local historian, they managed to obtain permission to excavate the well. As they lowered a bucket into the dark depths, a wave of icy air rushed out, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender and decay. The smell was overpowering, nauseating, a reminder of death and decay. The bucket came up filled with mud and debris, and amongst the muck, they found a tarnished silver locket. It was engraved with the initials, ER. The locket was cold to the touch, as if it had been submerged in ice water for centuries. The discovery of the locket, along with other evidence found in the well, confirmed Eleanor's story. Edward, now an elderly man living in a nursing home, was questioned by the police. He confessed to the murder, his conscience finally burdened by years of guilt. He described how he had lured Eleanor to the well, pushed her in, and then concealed the crime, claiming she had run away. Emma and Daniel, having brought Eleanor's murderer to justice, hoped that her spirit would finally find peace. But they were wrong. The paranormal activity in the manor escalated to a fever pitch. Objects flew across rooms with alarming force, shattering against the walls. Furniture overturned, its heavy legs scraping against the wooden floors. And blood-curdling screams, filled with rage and anguish, echoed through the halls, making their blood run cold. One night, as they lay in bed, the covers were ripped off them by an unseen hand, leaving them exposed to the icy chill of the room. They awoke to find the word, "Leave," scrawled on the wall in what appeared to be blood. The sight of the crimson letters, dripping down the wall like tears of blood, sent a wave of terror through them. Terrified, they fled the manor, seeking refuge in the village inn. But even there, they couldn't escape the haunting. Eleanor's ghostly image appeared in the mirror, her eyes filled with rage and vengeance. "You have disturbed my rest," she shrieked, her voice a chilling echo that reverberated through the room. "Now, you will pay." Emma and Daniel cowered in fear, their bodies trembling, their minds reeling from the intensity of the haunting. They had unleashed something evil, something they couldn't control, and now, they were paying the price. Desperate, Emma and Daniel sought the help of Father Michael, the village priest. Father Michael, a kind and compassionate man, listened to their story with a mixture of skepticism and concern. He had heard the rumors about Ravenwood Manor, the whispers of hauntings and restless spirits. But he had always dismissed them as superstition, the product of overactive imaginations. Now, faced with the genuine fear in their eyes and the chilling details of their story, he could no longer ignore the possibility of the supernatural. He agreed to perform an exorcism, hoping to cleanse the manor of its evil and bring peace to Eleanor's troubled soul. He believed in the power of faith, the ability of good to triumph over evil, and he was determined to help this young couple who had stumbled into a nightmare. Armed with holy water, a crucifix, and the power of his faith, Father Michael entered Ravenwood Manor. He moved from room to room, chanting prayers and blessing the walls. The manor resisted, the air growing heavy and oppressive, the temperature plummeting. He felt a presence, a malevolent force that pushed against him, trying to thwart his efforts. In the tower room, where Eleanor had been imprisoned, Father Michael confronted the full force of the haunting. Eleanor's apparition materialized before him, her form writhing in anger, her eyes burning with hatred. "You cannot banish me," she screamed, her voice echoing through the room. "This is my home." Father Michael, his voice trembling but firm, held up the crucifix. "Eleanor," he said, "I am here to help you. Let go of your anger and embrace the light." He pleaded with her, appealing to the humanity he believed still resided within her tormented soul. The struggle was long and arduous, a battle between faith and fear, good and evil. The room grew colder, the air thicker, as Eleanor's rage intensified, but Father Michael persevered, his voice growing stronger, his faith unwavering, and in the end, his faith prevailed. Eleanor's form began to shimmer, her rage subsiding. I just wanted to be free," she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. As Eleanor's form flickered, her spectral voice growing fainter, a wave of exhaustion washed over Father Michael. The exorcism had taken its toll, leaving him physically and emotionally drained. Yet, A sense of accomplishment mingled with his fatigue. He had helped Eleanor, offering her a measure of solace. But just as he thought the ordeal was over, Eleanor's voice, now a mere whisper, uttered words that chilled him to the bone. "He took more than just my life," she breathed, her spectral eyes fixed on Father Michael. "He stole my uncle's too, hidden behind the library." The apparition faded completely, leaving Father Michael standing alone in the oppressive silence of the tower room. He felt a renewed surge of dread. Edward's depravity, it seemed, knew no bounds. He had not only murdered his cousin, but also his own uncle, to secure the Ravenwood inheritance. Father Michael rushed downstairs, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. He found Emma and Daniel huddled in the drawing room, their faces pale with exhaustion and terror. "We have to find him," he said, his voice urgent. "Eleanor's uncle, Edward, murdered him too." Emma and Daniel, already reeling from the night's events, were stunned by this new revelation. The haunting, they realized, was not just about Eleanor's tragic fate, but also about the unpunished crime that had stained the manor's history. They knew they had to find their uncle's remains and bring him justice as well. Following Eleanor's fragmented guidance, they returned to the library, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. They searched for the hidden door, their eyes scanning the rows of bookshelves, their fingers tracing the outlines of the old volumes. Daniel, remembering the strange chill he had felt in the study, led them to the room where he had first encountered Eleanor's portrait. "It's here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Behind the bookcase." They examined the bookcase, their hands running over the dusty spines, searching for a hidden mechanism. Finally, Emma, her fingers tracing the outline of a carved rose on one of the shelves, felt a slight give. She pressed against the rose, and with a grinding sound, the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage leading to a hidden room. The room beyond was small and dusty, the air thick with the smell of decay. A single window, boarded up and cobwebbed, allowed a sliver of moonlight to penetrate the gloom. And in the center of the room, chained to the wall, they found a skeleton. It was the remains of Eleanor's uncle, his skeletal fingers still clutching a tarnished silver locket, identical to the one found in the well. The discovery of the uncle's remains sent shockwaves through Eldermist. Edward, confronted with this irrefutable evidence, finally confessed to both murders, his facade of innocence crumbling like the decaying walls of Ravenwood Manor. He was arrested and charged, his fate sealed by his own greed and depravity. Emma and Daniel, having fulfilled their promise to Eleanor and brought justice to her family, prepared to lay the ghosts of Ravenwood Manor to rest. They organized a memorial service for Eleanor and her uncle, inviting the villagers to attend. The once suspicious and fearful villagers, now understanding the truth, came to pay their respects, their faces etched with remorse and sympathy. The service was held in the manor's grand ballroom, the room bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. Emma and Daniel shared Eleanor's story, reading excerpts from her journals, revealing her intelligence, her kindness, and her tragic fate. They spoke of her uncle, a kind and gentle man who had been unjustly murdered. They cleared Eleanor's name, dispelling the rumors of witchcraft and madness, and honored her memory. As the last notes of the hymn faded, a sense of peace settled over the manor. The air felt lighter, the shadows less oppressive. Emma and Daniel, hand in hand, looked up at the portrait of Eleanor. Her eyes, once filled with sorrow and anger, now held a glimmer of serenity. A single tear, shimmering like a diamond, traced a path down her spectral cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a gentle breeze rustling through the room. "You have set me free." And with that, her apparition faded, dissolving into the ether, leaving behind a sense of profound calm. With the hauntings finally at an end, Emma and Daniel could focus on their dream of restoring Ravenwood Manor. They threw themselves into the project, their enthusiasm fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. They worked tirelessly, repairing the crumbling walls, polishing the tarnished silver, and breathing life back into the forgotten rooms. They opened the manor to the public, transforming it into a museum dedicated to the history of the Ravenwood family. Visitors came from far and wide, drawn by the manor's beauty and the poignant story of its former inhabitants. They wandered through the restored rooms, admiring the antique furniture, the faded tapestries, and the portraits that lined the walls. They listened to the stories of the Ravenwood family, their hearts touched by the tragedy and resilience of the human spirit. Emma and Daniel, now the caretakers of Ravenwood's legacy, ensured that the manor remained a place of beauty and remembrance. They honored the past, embracing the shadows and the light, and transforming a place of tragedy into a symbol of hope and resilience. They established a scholarship fund in Eleanor's name, offering opportunities to young women pursuing education in the arts and sciences. A tribute to Eleanor's intelligence and her thirst for knowledge. And in the gardens, they planted a memorial garden, a place of quiet reflection where visitors could pay their respects to Eleanor and her uncle. And so, the spectral screams of Ravenwood were silenced, replaced by the murmur of visitors and the laughter of children exploring the gardens. The manor, once a place of darkness and despair, was reborn, a testament to the enduring power of truth, justice, and the human spirit.